Hello, it's Wednesday 19th, and this is the New Arab Weekly podcast from the New Arab in London. Each week, we look at the biggest stories from the week and ask what happened and what does it all mean. This week, Donald Trump shows off his diplomatic credentials by threatening to bomb his allies. Palestinians in the West Bank continue to face state-sponsored terrorism. And US Special Envoy Tom Barrack tut-tuts at Israel's actions in Syria. This week, we're joined by Elias, Jahshan and Oliver Mizzi.
Hey.
On with the show. Ollie, settler violence, it's been around for a long time. It ramped up pretty dramatically following the start of the genocide in Gaza. This week, it reached the village of Qusra. When did the attack start? What happened? And, why Qusra?
Okay, so these attacks started on Sunday the 9th of August when Israeli settlers pitched a tent in front of the entrance of one of the homes in the village. This was the home of the family of Yusuf Hassan.
Yeah.
And they basically prevented anyone from entering or exiting the house. They also cut the electricity and the water to the house as well.
Classic tactics of settlers, right?
Well, it's a classic, it's a besiegement. And post-Sunday, that's what it ended up becoming. The starting phase of the siege lasted several days until the army was basically pressured by a mixture of international reaction, but also journalistic coverage, particularly from within Israel, forced them to move to take down the outpost and to get settlers away from the village. One thing to note about Qusra is that it is an Area B of the West Bank, meaning that it's under civil administration of the Palestinian Authority, yet under the security zone of the Israeli authorities. Okay. So the Israelis have security control over the area. Yeah. Regarding the specific reasons for targeting Qusra, like a lot of settler violence in the West Bank, as we've already noted in the introduction, this goes back years, as does for this village as well. So actually, rather than these attacks starting on Sunday, Sunday the 9th, residents of the village have told us that actually they go back to January.
Okay.
So that means that these attacks have been happening for about 8 months before the siege of this house began. As alongside Qusra, there's also been attacks in Jalud, which is south of the village.
These are all near Nablus, right?
Yeah, these are south of Nablus.
Okay,
which is around the center of the West Bank.
Okay, so they've been besieged by settlers.
Yeah.
Ostensibly since Sunday, August 9th, but in reality, at least since January, they've experienced violence. Then, as you said, the army moved in.
Yeah.
What happened then?
Okay, so it's really important to note that just because the army moved in after a couple of days doesn't mean that they weren't actually present around the village. Because in actuality, when the settlers pitched their outpost on the grounds of the house, blocking all entry or exit from it, the army was in fact there, and they were filmed on Sunday praying alongside the settlers. Following the extensive coverage where Israeli journalists, international journalists went to try and film and to try and report on it, and were either prevented by the army or by settlers, the border police and soldiers basically were forced into taking action against the settlers. And so on the Wednesday, they got into a clash with them.
The settlers and the army?
The settlers and the army,
right.
Exactly. Then, after that sort of attempt failed on the Wednesday, the Israeli military decided to basically create a closed military zone within Qusra, ostensibly to get rid of the Israeli settler outposts. And that operation, quote-unquote operation, started on Thursday. But what it also meant was that it effectively displaced Palestinian families in the village. So as well as getting rid of settler outposts in the preceding days after the start of this establishing a closed military zone. Yusuf Hassan's family, who were themselves besieged, have been forced into another home in the village, and a couple of other homes have also been, or Palestinians have been forced away from their homes and have taken up residence in other homes in Qusra.
Okay.
And that's because they have been occupied by the Israeli army.
So the Israeli army have now the settlers.
Well, I mean, you could say that, yeah.
I mean, is there any prospect of them returning?
Well, this is the thing. It's an ongoing situation. So water, electricity have been restored to the village. And yet, despite this, obviously that was in conjunction or in collaboration, or coordination is the correct term, rather. It's been done in coordination with the Israeli army. But medicine, food, and other essentials is very difficult to get into the village. This happened once under UNICEF. So UNICEF brought the supplies in. But that's only happened once, and now the village is basically calling for immediate assistance to get more food and more like medical assistance.
Okay.
It's really interesting that how you're describing the situation, how it's like basically usually the Israeli forces, they're protecting the settlers, they're paving the way for them, and they're letting them do their thing in kicking the Palestinians out of their homes. But in this situation, it seems like the settlers and the army has clashed. And do you know what the significance of this is, or what it could mean for future violent clashes or future violent acts that the settlers carry out?
To be honest with you, I wouldn't exactly call that a policy shift on the part of the Israeli military.
No.
I mean, yeah, there was a clash between the settlers and the army a couple of days after the beginning of this siege. But the reality is that settlers, even though their outposts have been disbanded around the village, they're still roaming around the village. Like you see settlers on quad bikes, you see groups of settlers between 5 and 15 roaming around the village, and that's under the watchful eye of the Israeli army.
It's intimidation tactics, right?
Well, I mean, that is intimidation. So in terms of it being a policy shift, I think that goes, that's too far to call it that, because at the end of the day, and Qusra is not the only place in the West Bank that has been suffering from violence in the last couple of weeks. It's just the most notable because it was the literal besiegement of a family. And I guess that hasn't really happened necessarily. Usually settlers, they attack Palestinian villages, they steal livestock, they burn homes and cars, but they don't necessarily enact a siege against specific homes. And yeah, there is a continuing policy within the West Bank of settlers conducting violence against Palestinian villages, and it's happened at the same time as a lot of focus has been happening, or a lot of focus has been on Qusra. I mean, I would say that in the last 6 months, there's been some notable reports from humanitarian organizations, both Israeli and international, talking about the systematized nature of settler violence, i.e. it's backed by the state. Amnesty International called it state-backed ethnic cleansing. This was specifically Palestinian Bedouins. And Peace Now also issued a report saying or detailing how this comes from the top of the government. This whole policy of allowing the settlers to, or inciting the settlers to attack.
I mean, we have cabinet ministers, Israeli cabinet ministers, who are themselves settlers.
Yeah, exactly. So the one thing I would say is that there has been a shift, but I wouldn't call it in a positive direction, rather in a negative one. Israel Katz, the defense minister, ordered the Israeli army to shift over policing to the Israeli police. Policing of settlers rather than Palestinians. But what it represents is another step towards annexation, which obviously is the sort of broader agenda that's happening within the West Bank under the eyes of the Israeli government and under Israeli policy, government policy.
Okay, so in spite of the Israeli army moving in against settlers. I think it's fair to say it's probably business as usual in terms of Israeli policy. Reaction. Any notable reaction, international, regionally?
The most notable reaction probably comes from Mike Huckabee.
Who's that?
The US ambassador to Israel.
Yep.
He is a very well-known proponent of, or supporter of, settlements in the West Bank, and also supports the annexation of the West Bank to Israel.
I think he goes much beyond that, doesn't he? I'm sure I've seen comments of him wanting a greater Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates.
Well, that's also something that's becoming more popularized amongst the far right within Israel. But the comment from Huckabee that gained significant attention was the fact that he described these attacks as terrorist attacks, and he described the settlers as terrorists. And he doubled down on those comments yesterday. So again, Tuesday. I would say that this criticism, coming from a supporter of the settlement project, is less about sort of a critique of settlements specifically, but rather the actions of groups like the Hilltop Youth, right?
Okay, yeah.
Which
they've been outlined and sanctioned by other nations as terrorist organizations.
Yes, I mean, though individual settlers as well as the group have come under international sanctions, and there has been criticism from key settlers as well to these, but I wouldn't say it's because they obviously are critiquing their own existence within the West Bank, but rather they don't want really undermined. And the term settler terrorism is quite an interesting one because it also has picked up usage as a sort of description of settler action in the West Bank within Israel, specifically from more the left of Israeli politics and the media. Although about dozens or 100, over 100 Israeli officers, former Israeli officers rather, wrote a letter to Donald Trump warning about settler terrorism in the West Bank. So this is becoming a term that's increasingly being used to describe these actions, which is another significant thing to note, I think, in terms of Huckabee's comments. Yeah. In terms of other condemnation, I would say it's mostly the same. Yeah. Settler attacks are bad and they should stop. This came from the UK. This came from the European Union.
They going to do anything?
Well, this is the thing, right?
No.
Palestinians on the ground want something more substantive. What they want is sanctions.
That's not unreasonable.
And to be fair, the EU is pondering EU-wide sanctions against trade with settlements, as is the UK government is actively considering more sanctions on Israeli settlements, specifically trade sanctions. But these are ongoing policy debates rather than a specific reaction to what's happening in Qusra. Yeah. Those were more words rather than actions so far.
I feel all these governments around the world are really running out of time to do something effective. But that is the situation. Thank you very much, Ollie.
You're very welcome.
Would you like to hear a fact?
Go.
Yeah? You want to hear a fact?
Yeah, go on.
I've got a fact for you.
Go on.
On this day, in 1953, Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was thrown from power as part of a CIA coup.
Backed by MI5, no?
Maybe, yes. There's a fact for you. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll have more of those next week. That was in 1953. Today, Elias, you weren't part of that, but you have something sort of on that strain to talk about. When the Memorandum of Understanding was signed in June, we ended the fight. Well, it ended the fighting between Iran and the US. It kicked off some talks aimed at sort of trying to get a more comprehensive peace deal. There were nuclear issues going to be discussed. They were going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. They were going to end fighting in Lebanon and a whole load of other things that were all equally achievable. The MOU has now expired.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Why has it not been extended? It seemed like a pretty good thing.
Look, I think in short, the MOU is just basically a formality. I think in many ways you can say the terms that came with the MOU 2 months ago, 60 days ago, they were all collapsing before the MOU even expired.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like how, speaking to the New Arab in an article we published earlier this week, Neil Quilliam from the Middle East Foreign Policy Specialist at Chatham House, I think he encapsulated it well. He said, the expiration of the MOU is, in one sense, the formal recognition of a reality that had already emerged.
Yeah.
And I think what he means by that is that, the ceasefire was breached so many times. The Strait of Hormuz is still in major crisis. Oil prices are still going up. There've been constant tit-for-tat threats from the US and Iran, and strikes are still going ahead. So it's just like the MOU in many ways was like a piece of paper that was just ripped up many months ago, but the formality of the expiry date just came and went. The only difference now, I think, is that now that the MOU is expired, it just gives both Iran and the US no restraints whatsoever in what they can do. Okay. Where before they had these restraints of what they can and can't do, even though they were breaching it so many times.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So effectively we were signing the death certificate, but it was already very much dead.
Yeah. And there's barely any trust between the US and Iran. So that didn't help with the talks. It didn't help with...
prospects of extensions.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's where we are. No MOU, that's gone. What does that mean? Are we heading, we've had violence throughout this entire period, but are we now heading back to more of the sort of the all-out war that we saw back at the beginning of this conflict?
I mean, that's a very real risk. And I think something we have to acknowledge that risk is it can easily happen in any minute's time. Even after we finish recording, something might happen. But I don't think that's necessarily the truth. I think the reality is that I think it's more likely that we're going to see a scenario of the US trying to manage a low-level conflict of sorts, and probably want to prioritize economic pressure on Iran through sanctions, through trying to get control of the Strait of Hormuz and stuff, rather than all-out war. And I think one of the main reasons why they wouldn't want all-out war is because we've seen reports of the US having low supply of missiles and stuff to attack Iran. They use so much of it. It's in the past 6 months. Yeah. So there's that hovering question that's over the Pentagon at the moment. But I'm sure so many people in the US, especially the right wing, much more right wing than Donald Trump himself, want to go back to an all-out war. But I don't think realistically that's not going to happen immediately. I think we are potentially going to see a build-up of tension between the US and Iran. If talks ever return, I don't know. It seems like there's no willingness on either side for them to return to the table to start talking things over again. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but Iran did put out a list of demands on the 17th, I think, or the 18th.
Yeah.
And there were a list of 6 demands. And one of those, I'll just read out the demands that they put out. There's $300 billion in reconstruction funds.
Is that all?
Full release of Iran's frozen assets of up to $120 billion, lifting the US naval blockade, the end of the war on all fronts, including Gaza and Lebanon, accepting Iran's permanent control of the Strait of Hormuz, including up to 7% of transit fees, and the lifting of all US sanctions on Iranian oil, petrochemical products, and gas.
And unicorns for everybody as well.
Yeah, and Iran basically gave America 3 to 4 weeks to meet these demands. Otherwise, they will escalate to an all-out war. So that I guess up until 4 weeks' time, this month that we have, we might have some sort of breather, I guess. But you just never know. One wrong thing can happen. It might be the most innocuous thing, or it might be the most ridiculous thing that Donald Trump posts on social media, and just everything can go wrong. So we just never know.
Yeah, well, everyone hold your breath.
Yeah, I mean, he has things that he has said have actually created stumbling blocks within the negotiations, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, given that it's all up in the air, in terms of both how Iran and the US and perhaps the region are going to act in the next 3 or 4 weeks, if the war is going to resume, then what exactly does the US have in terms of its ability to strike Iran?
I mean, the US for sure has the potential, it has the ability, has the resources to strike Iran. Well, we can't deny that. They do have, I think they do have that. But I think the point is that they might not have enough stock to be able to do the strikes and carry out the targets and that they want to.
It's not going to be on the same scale, do we think?
Yeah.
Than it was back in March.
Yeah.
Oh, it might even be more, but they just probably. I think it's more about how many of those objectives and missions that they want to achieve, and whether they feel confident in achieving those objectives with the resources they have.
Okay.
So I think at the moment they feel like they're quite constrained with the resources and stocks of weapon stock and stuff. So I think at the moment I personally think America is just favoring economic pressure on Iran, and but that just raises the question of how long that can last, because.
I mean, a long time, right? I mean, Iran has been under crippling sanctions now for, I don't know, years, decades. I mean,
decades.
Yeah, decades.
Decades. You know, and they're still there. They've shown time and time again that actually they have all the means necessary to bypass sanctions. So I don't.
Or withstand them.
Or withstand them. Yeah.
Well, they have withstood them
for
so long.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The Iranian regime are not really that interested in ensuring, their popularity amongst the people. Like, they don't need to, be providing services and whatnot. They're already disliked. Amid all of that, Trump, Ollie mentioned, he's been tweeting out things or truthing things or vomiting things out. He, in one of his more bizarre. Even for Donald Trump, in one of his more bizarre statements, he threatened to bomb Oman. A, why? B, what? C, why? Again. And also, what did Oman have to say about this?
I mean, look, Trump making this threat is hardly any surprise, let's be real. I think what happened is that Oman and Iran are negotiating some sort of arrangement of the control of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think Trump just felt threatened that one of his allies in many ways just undermined him.
Might be able to get the job done, which he can't.
Basically, yeah,
right.
yeah. And historically, Oman has been an interesting figure in terms of Middle East geopolitics. Even though they're not officially neutral, but they do come across as like a neutral player in regional geopolitics. So it's not surprising to me that they're going directly to Iran to sort of arrange their own thing without America, even though they are allies with America. So it's like, I think they do care about what America thinks, but at the same time, they're looking after their own interests more than America.
Yeah.
So
it's not unreasonable.
Yeah. So as a sovereign nation, they do have that right to do it. And I think Trump is just being that typically annoying, insufferable, fuck yeah, America kind of mentality by threatening to bomb Oman. He won't do it. He knows it'll be a political suicide if he did that.
I'd be really surprised.
It would be. But I have been surprised before. Also, again, I really do hate to bring him up, but he also declared that the Strait of Hormuz this week via JPEG, he declared that the Strait of Hormuz was now US territory. Yeah, I know. What is the state of the strait? What's that? What's happening there? Are things getting through?
I honestly cannot keep up. Things just change all the time. The ships do get through. Some ships don't get through. Some barrels of oil get through. Some of them are held back. There's some strikes are happening here and there. It changes by the day. So at the moment, the Strait of Hormuz is been what's been happening for the past 6 months has been barely any change. So things are getting through, but barely any. Of course, we're going to keep seeing the rise in oil prices until that is ever resolved. And even if it is resolved, I think oil prices are going to go down because these petrol companies are loving the profits they're making.
Yep.
I think the Strait of Hormuz at the moment is still in dire crisis. I think that no one really knows who's controlling what, and no one really knows who's rules to follow, who they're paying the tariffs to. I think what we're seeing with when Trump posted that photo, I think it was on Truth Social.
Yeah.
He literally, I personally think that he's just trying to goad Iran into an all-out war. So trying to goad them, provoke them into reinstigating the escalation of military assaults on US-based targets across the Gulf. And by provoking them, it gives America this, oh, well, they struck us first, so we have to defend, But even though that everyone knows that America started that war back in March. So
and didn't achieve any of its military
exactly.
objectives.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of I think it's just Trump just being really pissed off that he hasn't achieved any of his military objectives. He hasn't gained control of the Strait of Hormuz in the same way that he gained control of Venezuela's oil resources after they kidnapped the president earlier this year.
And the regime is still there.
Yeah. So I think he was hoping for a swift, probably being super confident of what he did in Venezuela. He thought he could do that in Iran, but that obviously hasn't happened. So it's probably just really pissed off and trying to go to Iran back into an all-out war and just make America look like the victim. So, yeah.
Well, we will keep an eye on the exploits of the winner of the FIFA Peace Prize and report back to you. Thank you very much, Elias.
No worries.
So Syria is still working a lot of things out in the country following the fall of the Assad regime to rebuild it, both its institutions and economy, following the carnage of the 14-year civil war. But its neighbor, Israel, has some other ideas, as was seen yesterday on Tuesday. So what happened between the two?
Dawn on Tuesday, very early in the morning, 8 airstrikes were conducted and hit the Abu Doha airport in northern Syria. They hit the runways and storage facilities. There were no reported either fatalities or injuries, but there was damage to the airstrips and storage facilities. There were no jets or any sort of aircraft of that ilk damaged either. It was really just infrastructure stuff. Just on that airbase, it's a major Syrian Air Force airbase. It's relatively close to the Turkish border, about 70 kilometers or so, or about 43 miles if you think that way. It's big, about 8 square kilometers, 22 runways. As did a lot of things in the country. It changed hands multiple times during the civil war. Following the airstrike, Syria, the United States, and Jordan all said that was Israel. Israel was very quiet and said nothing until later on in the day. On Tuesday, they did confirm that they were responsible. It's worth noting this is not the first time that Israel has struck Syrian air bases. In March of 2025, they struck 2 air bases, the T4 air base in Homs and also an air base in Palmyra as well.
So why did they do this? What's the point?
So there had been actually a pause in, I think if you remember, when the Assad regime fell, December 8th, almost within hours, the Israeli Air Force was conducting airstrikes in Syria, literally within hours.
Across the whole country.
The whole country. Since, in the past few months or so, we've actually had a pause in Israeli airstrikes in the country, which has been good, right? It's a good thing. This has sort of restarted that. And I think there are 2 sort of main reasons. Firstly, it is a message. The Israelis are sending a message to Syria not to try and rebuild its air force. The Israeli government do not like this new Syrian government. They've made that pretty clear. I think effectively the Western world, the US, European nations have all taken to Ahmed al-Shara and his new government, and he's the nice politician. He's got a suit and a tie, and he's friendly, and he shakes people by the hand, and he'll have you around for tea, and it's all very pleasant. I think in the eyes of the Israeli, he is still the fatigue-wearing jihadist putting out VHS tapes demanding death to everybody and all. Effectively, they don't trust him and they assume the worst of him, that he is still that sort of person. They also, want to be the dominant power in the region. They have for a long time. They don't want any rivals. Currently, Syria has no effective air force, and they don't want a country just to the north of them with an effective air force. That's, I think, the first thing to say. Secondly, they did it for the reasons that they stated they did it. I think prior to the attack on Tuesday, so on Monday, the day before, the airbase was visited by a military delegation from Turkey. Following the attack, Benjamin Netanyahu's office put out a statement saying, quote, Israel and Syria agreed to a status quo in security matters, which Syria was on the verge of breaching by permitting Turkish troops to deploy at an airbase near Syria. Now, refer to a few minutes ago, the airstrikes that happened in March of 2025, which hit T4 in Homs and the airbase in Palmyra, it was reported that Turkish military delegations had previously visited those. It was not confirmed. Since the start of the genocide in Gaza, and perhaps maybe even since the normalization agreements, Turkey has emerged as, let's say, the preeminent regional rival to Israel, and the country that will speak out the loudest against Israeli actions and policy, particularly in regards to the Palestinians, more so than Saudi Arabia has been doing, and certainly more so than any of the UAE has been doing, since normalization. Israel does not want Turkish forces moving closer to Israel. They would much rather have, Turkish forces in Turkey, and an option, I think, for them to be able to use Syria as a battle space should the worst come to the worst. And they can both move in there at the same time without one country already having permanent bases in Syria. That's, I would say, why Israel doesn't want Turkey to be in Syria. Turkey does want to be in Syria for a couple of reasons. They backed the Syrian rebels throughout the civil war. The Syrian rebels won that war. I think probably in their eyes, they deserve some of the spoils from that conflict. Part of those spoils would certainly be at least the opportunity to have military bases in Syria. The airbase that was struck, Abu al-Duha, is close to Idlib and sort of well within a Turkish sphere of influence. So that would be an obvious choice for them. It's all sort of part of rebuilding Syria's military as well, these efforts, and rebuilding air bases and things like that. Turkey wants a strong military ally in the region. Currently, Syria is a regional ally, but not necessarily strong. Hence why it would want to help rebuild military bases.
So given that we were speaking about Syria's regional relationships, Turkey being obviously the key one in this story, and Israel kind of inhibiting the ties between the two, what was the reaction, both within Syria from the government, but also regional allies internationally?
Yeah. Syria obviously wasn't happy, called it, quote, a dangerous escalation that threatens security and stability in the region. They accused Israel of attempting to drag the region towards further tension and instability, called on the UN Security Council to condemn the attack. Sort of usual sort of thing. The Turkish Foreign Ministry put out a similar sort of statement. We condemn the airstrikes carried out by Israel. Israel recklessly continues to attack that target, continue its attacks that target Syria's infrastructure and capabilities, violating territorial integrity. The usual sort of affair. The more interesting comments came from the US, more specifically US Special Envoy to Syria, Tom Barak. He's also the US Ambassador for Turkey. He came out relatively strongly, I would say, about sort of deep concern about the Israeli airstrikes. He came out and said that the US was working to establish a deconfliction mechanism, catchy name, gave an interview to Reuters saying, quote, "Thankfully, calm heads were able to prevent the situation from deteriorating further." He wasn't happy, I don't think, about it, but, I think we can... The US is the US, and their relationship with Israel is what it is. So that he also said, it reflected that the airstrikes reflected a perception, whether accurate or misplaced, that Turkey might, in the near future, increase its presence at that base, which is, no business of Israel whether they want to or not. I mean, whether it's the right thing or not to do, it's actually not up to Israel to decide whether to then conduct airstrikes or not. They are trying to, create this deconfliction mechanism involving Israel, Syria, and Turkey. And he said that the priority now is, quote, to lower tensions to allow space for a more measured approach. So he's going hard on diplomacy, is Tom Barrack.
So what comes next then? Like, do you think Israel is going to continue pushing in and into Syria, or do you think there'll be like more provocations or military assaults from either side?
I mean, I think firstly it's probably worth stating that actually Syria can't do anything, right?
Yeah,
they don't have the capabilities to keep Israel out of Syrian skies. If Israel want to fly around over Syria, they will. Neither can they defeat Israel on the battlefield.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why they haven't responded.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but neither they can't. We've had Syrian Israeli occupation of Syrian lands in the south, and Syria has made really no attempt to take those lands back.
Yeah.
They frankly have other issues that they need to deal with. I would say there's a couple of possible outcomes. I think given the sort of the response by the US, Israel may think twice about striking Syrian bases, particularly those which have some sort of Turkish involvement. Currently the US and Israel are saying not on winning terms. Obviously, we've previously spoken that Israel dragged, the US into the war with Iran, and we know how well that's going. And today, we spoke today even about how settler violence is getting rebuked by the US now.
Yeah.
But elections are coming in Israel. Netanyahu might decide that it's a price worth paying to look strong in the eyes of an Israeli voting public, particularly when he does seem to be behind in the polls. And also, I think he's probably gambling on the fact that ultimately the US won't do anything. Israel will get to do whatever it wants, as it always does, and the US will do nothing. They'll still sell them the arms. They'll still give them diplomatic cover at the UN, so they might as well gamble. There's one other thing I think worth considering. Since last week, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan all signed up to the Mecca Defense Pact. We mentioned it on last week's episode of the podcast. You would like to think that this will make Israel sort of reconsider its choices if it decided to go against Turkey inside Syria. We still don't know really what the full extent of cooperation is in line with that pact, whether it would, immediately trigger a response from the other two nations if military action was taken. But, we are also talking about Israel here, which, let's be honest, has never been meek when it comes to taking military action. So the option is still there for Israel to conduct airstrikes. Whether they will or not is up to them.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about the Mecca Pact as a sort of deterrent, but Turkey is also part of another really big military alliance, and that's NATO.
Exactly, yeah. So,
which also includes the US.
Yeah.
And also has an Article 5.
Yeah, wasn't it the Pakistani foreign minister saying any attack on any country that's signatory to the Mecca Pact is like an attack on all of us, which is basically what NATO is.
Which is basically what NATO is.
That's Article 5,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your move, Israel. A few other stories I've picked out from the New Arab, which I thought were interesting. Turkey's Erdogan signs law offering conditional pardon for thousands of PKK militants. Erdogan signed into law a measure that would introduce a conditional pardon for thousands of Kurdish militants as part of a government peace effort with the PKK. This seems good. Is this genuine? Or, is this a genuine attempt for peace? Or is this a ploy for votes, given there's going to be an election in Turkey and he would like to win? Or maybe it's a bit of both.
Didn't he win the last election with a overwhelming majority? So why does he need to win more votes? Like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm very sus of anything Erdogan does regarding the Kurdish minority in Turkey.
Yeah.
Given the history of the Kurdish minority in Turkey, and they're a significant minority. They're not like 1% of the population. They're significant. They're millions. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm suspicious. I'll look at that as quite cynical, very performative. It's probably just trying to pacify an enemy rather than actually achieve genuine peace, in my opinion.
I would say probably a bit of both. It's part of a long-term initiative to have peace with the PKK that we've spoken about a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But then again, he's cracked down on the opposition, so
he's not a shining beacon of democracy, is he? Let's be honest. Okay, African Union rejects foreign interference in Sudan as it seeks new peace push. The African Union has rejected foreign interference and efforts to establish rival governments in Sudan, warning that outside involvement is prolonging a war that has fractured the country and displaced millions of people. I mean, I relentlessly feel sorry for Sudan. I think it really had its war at the wrong time, when a lot of the world's attention was on Gaza and now on Iran. And some of the most appalling things have happened there, and the humanitarian crisis has happened there. In that sense, I mean, is foreign interference to do something quickly and just end the horror a bad thing? Or, what is this a good idea? I don't know.
I think
it's difficult.
I think the African Union are right in the foreign interference is prolonging the war, right? I mean, the RSF has some major backers in the UAE.
Yeah.
Colombian mercenaries as well, and obviously that has prolonged the conflict. But at the end of the day,
is that good foreign interference?
Well,
Elias is shaking his head firmly.
I don't believe in foreign. We've just seen across the region how foreign interference has done wonders to the MENA region. Like, I just have little faith in foreign interference ever leading to anything positive.
Well, I mean, all I would say is that Sudanese activists that I've spoken to have told me that at the end of the day, foreign diplomatic initiatives that have neglected to amplify the voices of Sudanese people, the Sudanese civilians, the people that were part of the revolution that happened in 2019 and that predated the conflict, without the amplification of those voices within Sudan, it's not going to matter anyway.
The lack of support that was provided to the civilian, government and council that was set up by the international community, I thought was appalling. But we'll watch that one. Jordan's King Abdullah courts China while keeping Washington close. Jordan's King Abdullah II departed for China on Monday, seeking deeper economic ties with Beijing at a moment when his country is trying to navigate an increasingly complicated relationship with world's major powers. Now, I always feel that every so often a story comes up about Arab nations going to China, and then there's lots of talk about China's going to come in and it's going to replace the US. And then the feeling I always get is China does not want to do that at all. I think they want what they want, but none of the mess. And it's actually only very small parts of the region. Is that accurate, do we think? Or is there actually a lot for China to benefit from if it got involved? And do we want China involved in the region?
I always thought it was more like an economic and trade thing rather than.
It's just that Silk and Road initiative, right? I think I always feel or the Belt and Road, Belt and Road initiative.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
The New Silk Road.
Yeah, the New Silk Road, exactly.
Yeah, I always thought it was more of an economic and trade initiative rather than military backing or anything like, or maybe some diplomacy. But I think I agree with you that I think it seems like China wants to be as hands off as possible when it comes to foreign interference because they're too busy looking after their own interests. They want to make sure they have enough resources for their 1 point something billion people living in the country. So they've got a third of the world's population to worry about than small few hundred million people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to worry about.
So I don't know. I just feel like it's more of a trade thing and making sure China has enough resources for its own people. But I could be naive with that. I don't know. So.
I would say China, China's a rising power. Let's put it that way.
China is a rising power.
And it has been involved in diplomatic initiatives in the Middle East over the last couple of years.
Iran,
Saudi
Arabia.
But also hosting the Palestinian factions as well.
That is true.
I mean, it's going to be a slow rise in the Middle East. It will probably take more, as you said, economic and trade forms as well. But it's a rise. What can I say?
I mean, the Chinese do think on a completely different timescale, I think, than Western governments.
Yeah,
where they are thinking in periods of elections, and China thinks in.
They think in periods of 5-year plans.
5-year plans, exactly, but multiple 5-year plans.
Exactly.
There's plenty more on the website. A few picks of the week, which we think you would enjoy reading from the New Arab's website. Ollie, what have you brought for us?
So my pick of the week this week is a piece from the analysis desk. It's titled "Beyond Syria, Russia's Role in the Middle East Enters a New Era."
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking about earlier in this podcast, obviously Syria's been undergoing a lot of changes in both its diplomatic relations, etc. One of those is obviously Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Within the last couple of weeks, the bases of Hmeimim and Tartus have been handed over to Syrian authorities under a new Memorandum of Understanding between the two. And what the piece does, it explores Russia's changing involvement in the Mediterranean and how that relates to its foreign policy in Africa. It's quite an interesting piece. I would recommend it.
Very good. Elias?
Yeah, my pick of the week is this opinion article about Jahshan that was published on the opinion desk. Mm-hmm. The headline, Jahshan Aday's Death and the Racist Weaponization of Plagiarism, is written by Brahim al-Marashi. It's a great opinion piece. It just sort of unpacks all the racism in UK media and how they hounded Professor Jahshan Aday over a plagiarism issue, and how it compares and contrasts to other plagiarism issues, and how they got off scot-free because they just didn't have to be people of color. So it's just really interesting dissected British media and the internalized, insidious, racist reportage around Jahshan Aday in the lead up to his death, and how they're still doubling down on that in many ways. So, and I know it's not MENA focused, but I think it's really important because we see that happening in so many places in the West, and we can make parallels with how that sort of coverage is used, or that approach to media reportage is implemented in the reportage of the Arab world or Palestinian people living in the West and stuff.
I've got also an opinion piece with crocodile moats for Palestinians. Zionism drops its mask. This is from Yoav Litvin. It was a good opinion piece, effectively talking about how the Israeli government is dehumanizing Palestinians, particularly in the eyes of Israeli citizens, and how dehumanization of Palestinians is becoming the norm in the country. They're all on the New Arab's website. They're all well worth a read, and you can find links to all of those articles in the show notes. Those were the biggest stories of the week. Elias Jahshan and Oliver Mizzi, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I've been your host and producer, Hugo Goodridge, and studio assistance and editing has been skillfully achieved by Sohaib el-Nahla. If you're watching us on Spotify or YouTube, hello. And if you're listening to us, did you know that you can watch us on Spotify and YouTube? Don't forget to subscribe to the New Arab Weekly wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit the bell to get notified when a new episode drops. If you have any questions that you want the panel to answer, leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, or you can email us, podcast@newarab.com. That's podcast@newarab.com. We'll be back next week and every week after that. Until then, stick with the New Arab for all the latest news, analysis, and opinion from the region.